Hi, I'm Coach Pav and welcome to this demonstration video of the progress screen. So we're going to start on the home screen, but obviously we want to go to the progress screen, so we're going to click that in the bottom menu. And here you can see all of the graphs and trends that we have available in an overview. So we're going to drill down and go through each of these ones individually in a moment. What I want to do is show you the lab report at the top first. So one of the really cool things about HumanGO is that we can integrate with the data that you receive from a human-powered health performance lab test. So I'm using the boss's account today, Eric. I'm going to open up this lab report as an example. So Eric visited the lab a while ago, and as you can see, all of his data has come through and is viewable in here. Not only that, but all of it informs all of the metrics within HumanGO, so you get a really accurate view of all of your physiology. The training is near perfectly orientated to your needs, and it's a really next level training experience when you're able to do this. Really, you're paying coaches a lot of money to get anywhere near this. Of course, not everyone has visited the lab, so we have this handy little button at the bottom, schedule a visit. This is going to open up the HPH website, and these are the current labs available. If you click on each of these, it will take you to the scheduling for that lab. So I'm going to click activity log at the top next, and here is all of the data that Eric has uploaded recently. And this is really cool because you can filter through it and you can find certain activities. Just makes finding data, certain rides, runs, swims, whatever it is, really handy. You can filter it down, get a collection, anything you need so that you can compare data later. But back to the overview. And before I drill down onto these, there's a little plus icon in the bottom right. Clicking that or pressing that opens up this little menu where you can manually add any of these. So I'm just going to do HRV for an example. If your wearable doesn't connect with HumanGO right now, or you just do it manually, it's very difficult for HRV, but resting heart rate might be a bit different or easier to do. You can input it here. You can also tell HumanGO as well. So the first one's aerobic and metabolic. Now, to simplify this, is essentially your thresholds and your zones per sport. So as you can see, I can click between each of the sports that Eric does. You'll only see the sports that you have selected in the sports menu. So you won't see swimming if you don't swim, for example. Now I can click on each of these and it will change it between heart rate and power. So if I take running as an example, because it has pace too, I can go through each of these and I can see the variations in Eric's power zones to pace zones to heart rate zones. And if I scroll down, I can see the threshold graph as it was set. So this might look very similar to this, because essentially what we're saying here is that between those two dates, his threshold was set at that. But over a long period of time, you'll gather a lot of data and you'll be able to see what your threshold or how your threshold has changed. And of course, if I scroll to the top, I can actually change the view range. So let's just do, for example, year to date. So that's going to be January 1st to today's date, which is April 4th. And then when I scroll back down, I can see that graph. And I can also go backwards and compare this against the same time period last year. Clicking the plus icon in the bottom right opens up the ability to set this. You can also go to HumanGO and ask HumanGO to schedule a test if you're unsure, or you can assess your performance from the plan page. Clicking the little hamburger icon in the top right opens up all of the data that you've put in here. So if you've manually set your threshold or you've done some testing, you'll see each of these in here. And for handy hints, click that little eye icon. You'll see these frequently around here next to HR, next to the threshold graph, and that's going to give you some information on what this is, what you're viewing. So we're going to go to body composition next, And as this sounds, this is essentially your weight, but we break it down by bone mass, muscle mass, body fat, and where available, BMI. This comes from a syncable device, so scales. So not all scales obviously sync, so you might not be able to get that in here. You can always press the plus icon, the bottom right, and manually add. So we can do the same thing at the top by clicking on the date, and we can select week, month, quarter, year, year to date, stuff like that. It's going to adjust the chart. And same in the top right, the little kind of hamburger icon shows you all the historical entries you've added. So now sleep. So I'm going to click on sleep. And again, this is taken from a wearable. You can add it manually by clicking the plus icon in the bottom right. And this is basically showing total sleep, including breaking it down by light, REM, and deep sleep. And then at the top, towards the top, average over the selected period. And we can click the date, and we can also go through and see how Eric has done this month so far. I'll scroll backwards. See last month, I can change it. I quite like year to date. It's kind of quite unique to have year to date and then be able to scroll backwards and compare this time period with the exact same time period from the year before, not just like a year or anything like that. Again, clicking the little hamburgery kind of icon at the top is all of the historic entries. You see where Eric is gathering that data from. So clicking health metrics now. So here we have some interesting information about average resting heart rate and average heart rate variability. We can see that in the graph there. Resting heart rate, HRV. You really want your resting heart rate to go down over a long period of time. It's, there's a limit to that. It's not going to always go down. You will hit a plateau almost, physiological limit. Same with HRV really. You want it to go up though. But you'll notice that times when you are more tired, stressed, you've slept badly, you've done more training, the end of a big block of training, before tapering, your resting heart rate and HRV might be trending negatively. Similarly, these two metrics inform the fatigue detection model. So when HumanGO notices these trending negatively over a certain period of time, or your subjective feedback either in the morning or after a workout, that's when HumanGO picks up that and will send you a little notification. So this really cool little graph at the bottom is the daily perception. So this is basically showing the difference or the correlation between soreness, fatigue, and mood over a period of time. Obviously, it depends on this being filled out. So this is why it looks a bit funky almost. But once you fill this out every day and you complete that morning feedback, you'll see this trending. So again, you can customize this. I'm not going to do it again because you've seen it a few times now. And the hamburger icon also shows historic data. So clicking on goal stats next. This is a cool one because it's basically broken down by the goal. So looking at Eric, past goal Berlin Marathon, we can see how his compliance and his fitness was for that. Fitness at 70% is pretty reasonable. Compliance at 10% is a bit shocking though. Come on, Eric. We can scroll down. We can see the fitness chart. So this is really cool. Obviously the blue line is the fitness, and you want that to trend upwards over time. Sometimes it's unrealistic. If you've trained really hard for, let's just say, an Ironman, and your next event is a sprint triathlon, what you might find is that actually your fitness is trending down. It's not necessarily a bad thing at all. You just don't need to be doing the same amount of volume for that. So when we look at fitness as a measure of the amount of load that you've done, and load is just simply volume multiplied by intensity, when you think about it like that, there will be times when your fitness does decline, between two certain goals. And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. Similarly, periodically, you might find that your fitness drops, after a end of season break, for example, is a great time in the base phase, depending on your starting fitness, might change. So you can see the little flag there, that's the goal day for Eric. And you can see, the little sort of mountainous green spikes and stuff. That is where Eric is either, loading or recovering. And you can see that big drop there. It goes down to red into the overtraining, detraining. That was actually when we went to France for 8 days and rode around. It's a shame that he couldn't maintain that level going forward, but CEO of a company. But as you can see, really, it's not realistic to have all of it always in the loading. As you do recovery weeks, you might see little green spikes going upwards, and certainly as you get to the event, you taper, you probably want to see that too. So scrolling down, now we have the training zones, time in zone comparison, so we can go between heart rate, pace, and power. And we can scroll back up and we can actually go by the different sports. So for this one, I'm going to put running. Let's come down and we can see for zone 2, planned amount of time for this goal, 1 day's 4 hours and 46 minutes, and actually Eric did 7 hours. So again, a little bit shocking there. But loads of filters here, loads of ways in which you can go through and check his cycling. It's probably quite good because of the France trip. At the bottom is your compliance. Again, Eric's quite low there. So the last one's the activity stats. This is really cool. I'm just going to pick cycling for this to give a better example. You can see that they're in the activities over this time period, Jan 4 to April 4th. Eric was given 38 and he did 32 of them. Total duration was 19.5 hours. The distance, 300 miles almost. A lot of elevation, average power. And a cool little thing here, cardio efficiency, which is essentially Eric did 1.3 watts per heartbeat. And again, this activity metrics graph's cool. I'm just going to see if there we go, it's a bit more for running, a bit more consistent for running, Eric. And you can see here, heart rate decoupling is the green dots along there. I can click on one to see it. And the efficiency factor is that red line. And so your heart rate decoupling is essentially where you would see a difference or a inflection point between power and heart rate. So if you can imagine that you were cycling at a certain power or running or swimming at a certain pace and you started to see your heart rate rise, or conversely, you were watching your heart rate and you couldn't keep up that pace or that power, that's the inflection point and the decoupling point. And what we look at here is the difference between the starting point of both the pace and the heart rate and the end point across an absolutely massive amount of data depending on your date ranges. And that gives you these heart rate decoupling values. And what we really want to see is for this to be a small amount, ideally less than 5%. And that shows you that you're quite aerobically fit. So if you're getting values higher than 5% consistently, that's a good indicator that you need to spend a bit more time working your aerobic fitness, and that's kind of that zone 2 type of training. And as you can see on Eric's graph in front of you, his heart rate decoupling is actually quite steadily holding. And that's what we want. That just shows that when you're below 5% and you're holding steady, if you're there or if you're dropping, if you're kind of around that area, you're aerobically fit. So if you look at yours and you can see, you're above 5% or you're trending upwards, that's a good indicator that you want to spend a bit more time doing low intensity training. For efficiency factor, as I mentioned, cardio efficiency is essentially your input and your output. So for every input of heartbeat, what are you outputting in terms of pace or power? Now, for somebody who is an elite runner like Eric, you wouldn't expect to see this trending upwards, but for the average mortal, you would want to see that steadily trending upwards over a long period of time. Again, isolated data points, one run, one ride, one swim, whatever, aren't necessarily the best way to look at this. And that's what we do really well. You can see this graph over a long period of time. So scrolling down, we can see peak stats, and this is the same it's for whatever sport. For running, obviously, we do it by this. And just scroll back up, we'll see it's cycling. Scroll it down, as you can see. And that's for this time frame as well. So let's do year. Let's do 2014. Very respectable peak stats for 2014. Scrolling down, we can see the activity map. And this is kind of just, as it sounds, where in the world an activity has been recorded. And then activity perception at the bottom. So this is intensity of the workout. We're missing the average mood and RPE. If that was there, we would be able to marry and correlate how Eric was feeling and felt against the intensity. And over a long period of time, you would want to start to feel more comfortable at intensity. And that's it. Thank you for watching this overview of the progress feature.